Joining us right now with more is Fox News military analyst, retired four-star General Jack Keane. General, wonderful to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Maria.
What does the president mean when he says he wants to call these countries out? When it comes to these threats, in particular from North Korea, what should we expect?
Well, it's interesting to watch the Trump doctrine, so to speak, these last 8 months, because he's done a couple of things, I think, that have eliminated anybody's doubt about President Trump and his aspirations for global leadership. One, he's reassured our allies in the Far East, in the Middle East, and in Europe that the United States has got their back. And secondly, a very important part of his foreign policy is he's willing to confront our adversaries in a way that his predecessor never has. And he will do that, I'm confident, in his speech today, for their aberrant behavior and their aggressive assertiveness and what they are doing in terms of trampling on U.S. interests and also those of our allies. And what it's really about is building a constituency there on a world stage in the UN that we should collectively stand up to this kind of aggression. And that includes Russia and China, because we're in big power competition again with them, and they are also taken advantage, at least in the past, of the United States and our allies.
Yeah, you would think that that's not brain surgery. I mean, you would think that this is an easy one. That he is having this kind of sentiment right now in the face of what this country faces and the world faces. Let me turn to Capitol Hill, General, because the Senate easily passed a nearly $700 billion defense bill backing President Trump's call for a bigger and stronger military. The House passed its version of the bill at a similar spending level back in July. The two now have to be reconciled before Congress considers the final version. What are you expecting the final compromise to look like? Is this in step with what you believe this country needs right now? We've talked a lot about the lack of strength in our military right now and the lack of readiness.
Yeah, this is a step in the right direction. I mean, to give you a sense, the congressional leadership that deals with the defense issue is so concerned about the Department of Defense and the erosion of its capabilities that they bumped up President Trump's submission to them by about $30 to $40 billion in the House and the Senate. They'll go to conference to resolve the differences that they have, but they're not major differences. All that said, it'll still take about a month or so. Then they'll be able to send something to the president to sign. But before this actually becomes law, in the sense that that money is going to be appropriated by the appropriation committees, what'll have to happen is the budget caps that we're living under right now will have to be removed. And that will take, in the Senate, 60 votes to get that removed, and the Democrats may not go along with it. So what we are saying here, big step in the right direction. You got to applaud those committees that voted for it. By the way, the Democrats on those committees voted for this legislation, and testimony to the leadership on those committees, and also for those Democrats who are sitting on the defense committees that know how seriously the problems are inside the United States military. But we do have a major collision coming probably after the holidays when the appropriators sit down, and can they really write the checks for that? They're going to have to get the budget caps removed, and that will require another vote legislation to do it.
So does that go up against other legislation that he's trying to do? I mean, if you say we're going to have a major fight on this toward the end of the year, is that going to bump up against, for example, tax reform?
Well, I think it's all interwoven, obviously, whether the Republicans and Democrats kind of agree on just about anything.
Right.
But here, there has been a significant education inside the Congress about the seriousness of the problems that the United States military has. And I hope that the Democrats can put their national security hat on and take the anti-Trump hat off and vote for what's right for the security of the American people.
You know, I remember it's got to be 6 months, 8 months ago, you and I were speaking about this subject, and I said to you, wow, you really scared me there. I remarked about one of the comments that you made about the readiness of our planes, and then just about a week ago, the Wall Street Journal wrote about it. But you told us this. Remember, we were talking about, I think it was the Navy, and you told me, what was the percentage of ships that are not ready?
Well, it was airplanes, and depending on the service, right, they go from 40, 50, or 60% not ready. And what happens is the missions are still out there. We have to perform them, and we're doing it with less airplanes, and that creates more unreadiness because those airplanes start to break after a while. And it's no accident that the mishaps have gone up in the services in aviation and also some of the problems the Navy has, I'm convinced it's all related to this readiness issue.
Because we've got these training accidents that are actually bringing it to the forefront now. We've seen a number of accidents just recently. General, I have to get your thoughts on this. President Trump met with French President Emmanuel Macron at the United Nations yesterday, where President Trump gushed about seeing France's military might on display when he attended Bastille Day celebrations in Paris back in July. Listen to this.
Because of what I witnessed, we may do something like that on July 4th in Washington, down Pennsylvania. I don't know. We're going to have to try and top it. But we had a lot of planes going over. We had a lot of military might. And it was really a beautiful thing to see.
I'll tell you, these two look like they get along quite well. What do you make of the military parade down Pennsylvania Avenue come July 4th? Good idea, General?
I like it. I mean, we all know out in small-town America and cities on the 4th of July, there's parades all being held, patriotic parades, not usually having a lot of military involved in it because they're not all available to do something like that. But I think a parade like that, the American people would love. I mean, they'd still be celebrating 4th of July in their hometowns, but a lot of people who come to Washington during the summer would certainly enjoy it. You know, we have a military concert in the early evening, followed by fireworks here in Washington, D.C., a parade early in the day. I think it's a terrific idea.
Let me ask you about Afghanistan. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis now confirming that the U.S. will send the additional 3,000 troops to Afghanistan, which would bring the total number of U.S. troops in the country to more than 14,000. What do you think this mission will be? What's your take on the additional 3,000?
Well, I suspect they're going to continue to be people who are going to help advise the Afghan National Security Forces on the ground, hopefully a little bit closer to the battlefield so they can make even more of a difference. There may be some special operation forces in there to increase the counterterrorism mission. That's going after the Taliban leadership. But I'll tell you, Maria, the major issue here is Pakistan. We have got to apply whole-of-government pressure on Pakistan to shut down those sanctuaries where the Taliban are taking refuge. No counterinsurgency has ever succeeded against insurgents in the history of it who had a safe haven outside the combat zone. And the Afghan Taliban have two of them. It's outrageous. The Trump administration is making a commitment to do something about this. The two previous presidents failed miserably in achieving that end. This is something that has to take place or we cannot succeed.
What do you feel will be a successful speech today when the president is done? I mean, should he be mentioning Afghanistan? We know he'll bring up North Korea and Iran. Is that the right tack?
Yes, I think mostly this is about America exercising global leadership, and the world stage here is the UN, 193 nations. And the thing I applaud about President Trump, I'm not sure it was certain during the campaign, but he has stepped up and put American leadership back on a world stage, promoting prosperity, peace, stability, and security, and a willingness to confront our allies. I think that will be resonant in the speech today, much as it was in his speech in Poland and a couple of others that he's made, one in Paris as well.
Yeah, they were certainly successful there. General, good to see you. Thanks so much.
Good talking to you, Maria.